Mic 1 test.
Mic 1 test.
Mic 1 test.
Mic 2 test.
Mic 2 test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Mic 3. So you hear.
Mic 3, 1, 2, 3.
I knew she is. You're so excited to be there.
So
And
excited.
it should be mic 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Welcome into the Frogs Today Pre-Game Show. It is week 4 of college football. We are ahead of the TCU SMU rivalry game. Going to go on at 11 a.m. kickoff today, one of TCU's favorite games of the season. We'll talk a lot more about that later. But before we even get to that point of kickoff, we've got to recap TCU and Houston last week. A big win for TCU on the road, first road game of the season. TCU wins 36-13. And after we have that recap, TCU Athletic Director Jeremiah Donati joining us on set. And after that, we've got an SMU preview. And then finally, we'll close out the show with our stars of the game. You're going to want to stick around, a lot to talk about today ahead of tonight's matchup. So let's go ahead and get into those TCU Houston highlights.
They're really high on him as a covered guy in that secondary.
Nice.
Sprinting down the sidelines, touchdown, Warren Thompson. 33 yards. And he's just giving him a little bit of that Samore with that big-time tackle, 2nd and 9.
Man coverage.
Bailey.
Nice
Bailey.
move.
Touchdown.
Be able to do the Kendall Browse told us he needed to do, that he followed the script and he executed perfectly.
Smith's pass is going to be intercepted. Inside the 10, they dropped back beautifully and made the play. And it's Zach Marcaselli that comes away with the interception.
Yeah, that's why he's in that guard position.
1st and 15.
There's another
lobbing
shot.
it deep for Williams.
That's it.
Savion. Touchdown.
Relative to the 34. That's how you steal possessions.
Yeah, without the golden kick return, it would have been over. And here goes Sanders. Trey Sanders with a touchdown.
Big game offensively and defensively for the Frogs last week. And ironically, TCU now sits first place in the Big 12 Conference, the first conference game to be played this season, 1-0 in conference. What a start for the Frogs. And so we've got a lot to talk about with especially the passing. Let's go ahead and break it down by passing, rushing, and then obviously ending with the defense. Starting out with Chandler Morris, we've seen him improve every single week. This week, last week, he had 35 first downs, went for a 67.9% completion percentage, 314 yards passing, 367 total. That is an incredible jump from weeks 1 and weeks 2 especially. And he had 2 touchdowns. He did have that 1 interception, which is something we haven't been seeing him do very much of. So let's hope we can figure that out tonight, obviously.
Absolutely.
But something interesting we did get to see was him airing out those passes a lot more. We saw a lot wider passes, a lot longer passes. He's definitely getting more comfortable in the pocket. Something we do want to talk about, though, before we get into those receivers is the quarterback pressure. We're going to be talking a lot about the quarterback pressure and protecting Chandler Morris tonight, making sure that pocket doesn't close. He's only getting pressured 6% of the time last week during Houston, but when he's under pressure, he's only completing those passes 43% of the time. That's one of the lowest stats in college football right now, so he definitely wants to make sure that he stays out of that quarterback pressure. And then let's go ahead and get into those receivers.
Absolutely. With wide receivers, we have 3 main receivers for highlights. We have JP Richardson, Savion Williams, and Warren Thompson as our 3 main guys, but it's very important to note that across the board, we have 10 receivers involved, which is kind of unlikely. We haven't really locked down our main receiver core quite this yet. But for JP Richardson, he had 6 for 60 yards against 6 carries against Houston, and with longest one being 16 yards, which is, great for him. But Savion Williams, he had 3 carries for 54 yards.
That was my star of the game last week. I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah. The longest one being 31 yards for a touchdown, important to note.
Super important.
So these passes and these carries have been getting a lot longer. Just like you said, Chandler's been getting a lot more comfortable on the field, and I think that's showing up for our wide receivers. Warren Thompson had 1 carry for 33 yards and a touchdown pass.
Absolutely. That catch was for a touchdown. So that's impressive also to just see those 2 guys getting over 30-plus yards for a touchdown. That's really great to see Chandler Morris step into that comfort zone a little bit more. And that's a lot what Sonny Dykes has been talking about every single week, that these guys are just getting more and more comfortable on the field. And we've also got the run game to talk about. Going into it, our leading rusher is Amani Bailey, 23 carries for 129 yards last week. that's a great stat, especially looking at what TCU is just sidetracked a little bit, but what TCU is holding other teams to, 60 yards. TCU's defense is holding other teams to 60 yards per game for their
Yes.
rushing yards. And for our guys to be able to get upwards into those hundreds, that shows a lot of what this TCU defense can do and what this TCU offense can do on the rushing. Talking a little
Absolutely.
bit more about Chandler Morris, he is our second rusher.
He is. He's definitely, like you said, been getting more comfortable on the field, and that's showing up with him being the second rusher. You know, he's not our leading guy, but that's not necessarily what we want for a quarterback.
Absolutely.
Like we said, we want Amani Bailey up there, and that's what
Yeah.
he's doing. But Chandler Morris is still showing up. Against Houston, he had 12 carries for 69 yards, the longest being 13 and an average of 4.4 yards per carry.
Which is exactly what Sonny Dykes has mentioned in every single press conference when you ask him about Chandler. He wants Chandler to know when he should run the ball, when he should throw the ball, and when he should pass it off to one of his other guys to run the ball. And as Chandler told us in the post game, he can always trust number 9 Amani Bailey with the ball. So that's super exciting to be able to see him get definitely more comfortable with those guys. And obviously Trey Sanders being third, that transfer this season, he's getting a lot more comfortable in the game. And as we talked about earlier, you can't ever mimic in-game experience. So for him to be getting these touches on the field, even though he's not the leading rusher, is really important for this TCU team. Transitioning now to the defense. And boy, we've got a great stat about 2 consecutive games in a row. Tell us the stat.
So TCU defense only allowed no offense touchdowns in the past 2 games, and that hasn't been seen since 2017.
Yeah, that is so impressive to not allow any offensive touchdowns for a defense. And I think that is so exciting to see what this TCU defense really has stepped into more comfortability as the season has gone on. And I think it's really important to look at these stats because it shows us how much Sonny really is correct about how TCU looks exactly like last year's national championship team at the beginning of the season. A little rocky. Nobody expected them to go that far. Transitioning now to this season, they look the exact same, if not better, than that team.
Absolutely. We definitely saw a lot from TCU against Houston with 61 total tackles.
Absolutely. Naomi Obiezor and Johnny Hodges being those leading guys. They've definitely stepped into that, I would say, the leading role on the defense. We've seen a lot from them, and they've been very vocal about kind of how they motivate the team, especially Johnny Hodges. And Johnny Hodges also had 2 sacks, so he can definitely walk the walk and talk the talk. And talking about pressure in that pocket, Houston took 62 offensive snaps, and TCU had 4 quarterback hurries with 6 sacks, which is the most sacks TCU has had in a game this season. They've applied pressure 16% of the time against Houston. So 16% of that time, that team was under pressure. And in comparison, once again, Chandler Morris was under pressure only 6% of the time. So 10% more of the time, Houston was under pressure. So that's super important for that defense to be able to push that stat. And versus Nicholls State, the Nicholls State offense was under pressure 9% of the time, and versus Colorado, 12% of the time. So in all 3 games, the average TCU is applying is 11% of the time.
And going back to those 6 sacks against Houston, that's also the most we've seen since 2017 against Baylor. So we've really seen our defense step up. So let's see what they're going to continue to do this season. But those 6 sacks is definitely something to note.
Absolutely. And after that first game, we saw a ton of talk about what the TCU defense wasn't doing and how unproductive they were on the field. And I think we've seen them kind of take those criticisms to heart and really show, no, we know exactly what we're doing, especially when we follow the game plan. But we're going to have more of that. Let's go ahead and get into the state of the Frogs. Our very own J.W. Wilson sat down with Sonny Dykes this week.
Yeah, I think the big thing, obviously, after week 1 was we wanted to get better. I think we wanted to play a more physical brand of defense, a more aggressive brand, make sure we're not getting on our heels, like we did week 1. And to our players' credit, I mean, they've played really tough. They've played really physical. We've done a good job stopping the run so far this season. I've given up some yards passing, but I think that, for us, it always begins with being able to stop the run. And so I'm pleased with the way they're playing. I'm pleased with the improvement that we made. In today's modern college football, I mean, it's hard to go 2 weeks in a row and not give up a touchdown. And so I'm starting to like what I see from that unit. And the guys did a great job in short yardage situations. Got 2 big stops early in the game on 4th down that I thought were very, very important for us. and allowed us to create a little bit of separation.
On set with us now, as promised, TCU's athletic director, Jeremiah Donati. As always, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So this week you got something exciting to do. You were kind of Mr. World Traveler this week. Not world, but you did get to go to DC. You had to talk about the NIL stuff and what TCU is doing, kind of speak for everybody. So tell us a little bit about that conversation, kind of how you got that opportunity.
Well, first of all, it was an experience of a lifetime. It was pretty exhilarating, exciting to be up there on Capitol Hill. And when your local congressman calls you and asks you to be a part of this, it was no brainer. But we can't sit here and complain about things we don't like about NIL and then not want to be a part of the solution when you're asked to go and say your piece. So it was a great opportunity to go there and talk about the shortcomings, if you will, of NIL. We love NIL. It's been a great thing for our student athletes, but we need some uniformity around it. Yeah. And so we've gotten to a point where the NCAA is really in a tough spot because of the lawsuits they're facing, and we need some federal help. And so Gene Smith, the athletic director at Ohio State, and I were two of the athletic directors that were selected. It was it's quite an honor to be there with him. He's retiring. He's kind of the gold standard as far as ADs go. So it was a great experience. I'm happy it's behind me because it took a lot of time to prepare for that. And, I wanted to get back here.
You're nervous?
And honestly? Okay, I'll tell you a quick funny story. Yes, my hand was shaking a little bit there while I was reading the testimony. But those are the things you get excited about. Yeah. The day that becomes the day I'm not nervous, then we'll be in trouble, right? Exactly. It matters. So, but I wanted to get back here, and obviously we got a huge game today, and fired up to see the guys play.
Absolutely.
So last week was TCU's first conference game against Houston. How do you think they did starting off as their first conference game?
Well, I'll tell you what. You win by 26 points on the road in this conference. You can't really say too much negative. I would say it's coming together, and the first half it felt like nothing was going our way. And they just kept fighting, and boy, we've got some real talent out there. And you start seeing the offense starting to click. The defense, holy smokes! I mean, they looked really good. So, anytime you win on this in this business on the road, 26 points, you're going to take it. But Sonny would tell you there's a lot of things we need to clean up. And I think if you think back to a year ago, it was really Game 4. Things really started to gel and come together. Today is Game 4, and I'm expecting a big performance today.
It's like you read our pregame script.
I did. I was telepathically. I got the notes.
So TCU and SMU, as of right now, haven't scheduled a game past the 2025 season. A lot of mixed reactions about that. What was kind of the thought process behind that?
Well, so I'll set the record straight. I've done this a couple of times. But, we have to play 9 conference games, and then we have what's called a Power 5 mandate. So for us, we have to schedule a Power 5 game every single year, and those are home and away series. So Colorado, next year we play Stanford. The following year we play North Carolina, then Duke, then Purdue. So those games are scheduled out. That's part of that's a Big 12 conference mandate. The home and away series with SMU was really problematic for us because we're the only Power 5 school in the country playing a group of 5, a home and away, in addition to that Power 5 mandate, in addition to the conference schedule. And look, it's my job to put our football team in the best possible position. And doing that, playing more road games is not ideal. So we want to play more home games. The door is open to playing them in the future. Now that they're in the ACC, we're already starting to think about, okay, once you get to 2030 and you've got some open dates, could you resume that series? So, when the season's over, we'll resume the conversation. It's not about SMU; it's about playing more home games. And so that's really the big thing. In 26, for example, we have 8 home games. 8 home games for the first time in our history. That's if the goal is to play in the college football playoff, you want to play home games. That's the key to it. So it wasn't about not playing SMU, it was about playing home games, and they're not going to want to play us home every year here. So we will play them again. I mean, I'm getting some mail from SMU fans that are saying, "Why'd you cancel the series?" We didn't cancel. We paused. It's just going to look a little different, and I think it's time to evolve. Our scheduling has nothing to do with them. I've got a lot of respect for their school and their program, and but I get paid to do what's best for TCU.
Yeah. You get paid to do those things.
No matter what, today is a big game against SMU, and it is family weekend. What are your expectations for the crowd today?
Oh boy, if you were walking the pregame tailgates, you'd see a lot of family, a lot of parents. One thing I love about family weekend is, the parents come here and boy, they get after it. They're really having a good time watching their son or daughter or both. Really enjoy their time here at TCU. For us, it's kind of like. It's a way to show what their investment is doing. We'll have a jam-packed crowd here. It'll be great. The tailgates are already kind of hopping, and it's fun to see people kind of reliving their younger years, I guess. So in all seriousness, we'll probably have 20,000 people on campus from yesterday through tomorrow that are just in town to visit their they're young students, and so it's a great opportunity for us to show off what TCU is all about.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us
My pleasure.
today.
Good to be with you.
And when we come back, we'll have more on TCU in Houston.
We're lucky to have a collective that's as strong and as powerful as the Flying T Club. It's a big deal for us. It is a game changer. I would just encourage any fans out there to support it. Everyone asks me, what's the biggest priority? And I say, NIL is big. Please jump on board, show these student athletes how much they mean to you. The thing about NIL is I think there's a right and a wrong way to do it, and the Flying T Clubs do it the right way. Let's keep winning. Join the Flying T Club today.
John's Grill is the newest venture from John Bennell and the Bennell's Restaurant Group. A ranch-to-table concept featuring food, beer, and spirits from around the great state of Texas. Our menu is designed by Chef Sean Alvarez and features 2 chef-inspired burgers, the Fatty and the Flatty, plus a brisket menu perfect for your casual night out. Fast casual service in a fun, relaxed, family-friendly environment. Featuring 11 big screen TVs for you to catch the big game on. Our mixology team has created a crafts cocktail and beer menu featuring local spirits and brews from across Texas. John's Grill, home of the Players Club show each week. 2905 West Berry Street in Fort Worth. Or online at johnsgrill.com. Simply the best barbecue in Fort Worth. Dine in, catering, or drive-thru. 2900 Montgomery, just off I-30. Remember, the best barbecue in Fort Worth is at Railhead Smokehouse.
In Botham, we put people first. So we simply start by listening to you. Whether you're searching for customized insurance, HR, or financial solutions to protect your home, car, health, business, or employees, our specialists are here to serve you, the people you care about, and your success. Higginbotham, insurance, HR, and financial services. Inspired by you.
And TCU and Houston had a great game, but there were also, as always, things you want to fix. And this is a lot of the stuff that Sonny Dykes was talking about. So let's go ahead. Let's get into these penalties.
Yes, Sonny has been saying it. He said it on Tuesday. He said it every single week. There's too many penalties on offense. TCU, they call a play. They get a penalty, and it rattles them. There's a fumble. They throw an interception. They're just really trying to avoid these penalties because it just rattles the team, and they're just showing up over and over again.
Absolutely. Just comparing it for TCU and for SMU ahead of tonight's game, looking at the penalties and yardage on the season so far, TCU is 22 penalties for 203 yards. That might sound like a lot, and it is, because SMU is 15 penalties for 125 yards. And keep in mind, we've each played 3 games, so this is a very even stat comparison. And taking a look at what they did versus Houston, 28% of the time when TCU was penalized, the next play they were unable to score on a drive with a penalty, went 70 for 75 yards. Versus Nicholls State, 20% of the time unable to score on that drive that had a penalty on it. And it doesn't even need to be a penalty right before the drive, right before that touchdown pass. It is any time that they are on a drive and they get a penalty, they're unable to score. And versus Colorado, it was 30% of the time. So TCU really wants to get that figured out as for penalties. And we're talking about those false start penalties, those things that really don't need to be happening. Like you said, when they're in the red zone, TCU has thrown 3 interceptions in the red zone at this point. They've had 2 fumbles. That's something TCU really wants to fix ahead of tonight, with especially such an excellent SMU defense that they normally don't boast, but this season they've got a good defense.
Absolutely. Another thing that TCU really has to focus on is their QB protection. Whenever Chandler is pressured in the pocket, he doesn't always make the pass or complete the pass. Looking at Houston, 88 plays of offense,
2 sacks, 3 sacks, 2 hurries, which means Houston, like we talked about earlier, that 6% is where that comes in. So he's not getting pressured as often as especially TCU is pressuring other teams. Comparison to what we said about TCU's defense versus Houston, they were pressuring 16% of the time. So there's a huge difference right there. But the key part of that is that when Chandler is under pressure, 43% of the time he's unable to make the pass. that's something that TCU definitely wants to get fixed, and they definitely want to avoid that under pressure play for Chandler. Versus Nicholls State, though, Chandler was pressured 1.5% of the time, and versus Colorado, 1.3% of the time. So it's something that TCU normally has figured out. This was just a setback versus the Houston team, and it was the first time Chandler had been sacked in a game. He had 3 sacks. He was sacked 3 times. So there's definitely a lot to talk about there. And when we get back, we are going to go ahead and get into that SMU TCU rivalry we've all been waiting for.
We wouldn't be able to do the things we were able to do this year without the Flying T Club. So we got to continue to get people involved. It's more important right now than it's ever been.
Flying T is special. It's the best thing that I've encountered in college. It allows us to be able to offset a lot of the costs that our scholarships aren't able to cover. If people like winning, invest in the Flying T Club and NIL.
It's almost a necessity now in the college football world. I mean, you got to kind of invest in the programs, and what you put in is what you get out.
In Botham, we put people first. So we simply start by listening to you. Whether you're searching for customized insurance, HR, or financial solutions to protect your home, car, health, business, or employees, our specialists are here to serve you, the people you care about, and your success. Higginbotham, Insurance, HR, and Financial Services. Inspired by you.
Simply the best barbecue in Fort Worth. Dine in, catering, or drive-through. 2900 Montgomery, just off I-30. Remember, the best barbecue in Fort Worth is at Railhead Smokehouse.
As always, we got to get into the history of this rivalry as well before we can even begin to talk about what this game means for both of these teams tonight. And a great quote we heard in the press conference. What was said?
Absolutely. Andrew Coker said, SMU only exists to beat TCU. If they beat TCU in their minds, they have a good season.
And I think that's definitely true. We see that being true, especially with social media posts. And I think that's kind of why TCU fans and players know that it's this big of a game, because TCU can beat them, think nothing of it, just another win in the belt and go to the national championship, have a great season. If SMU beats us, it is their national championship season. So TCU really wants to lock this down. Going into a little bit of the history, they've played each other all but 7 seasons since 1915. And what game is this?
This is TCU and SMU's 102nd game today.
And that's a ton of games. And obviously TCU, there wasn't always a iron skillet there. They actually came up with that in 1946 after both campuses the year before saw each $1,000 in vandalism in 1945. So they decided they better get a trophy to replace all that extra energy that fans have before the game. And, they ended up losing the skillet at one point. I'm not sure where it went. I'm sure as wonderful TCU fans got it hanging up in his office right now. But, the rivalry is going to be pausing again, as we just talked about with ADJD. So they won't be playing as of right now past 2025. But like we just said, they've paused for 7 years in a row. So it's not the first time we've seen a pause, and I'm sure we'll be seeing this team again. But let's go ahead and get into what the players had to say about the TCU and SMU game. This is JP Richardson, wide receiver.
100%. I think we're moving the ball really well, but penalties and turnovers, stuff like that, stuff that we control is what's stopping us from getting the ball in the end zone every single drive. So we just got to clean some of that up, and we'll be unstoppable.
What are some of the things you guys as a receiver group have talked about with helping the offense get better?
Catching the ball. We drop the ball too much, I think, still, and that's one thing that we've put a big emphasis on, catching the ball and getting right up the field. I think sometimes we try to do too much, especially on third down. You got to know the down and distance, and when you catch it and you try to, start juke and do too much, just get up the field. And so that's one of the things that we could clean up, and, yeah.
How much growth have you seen in Chandler from week 1 to last Saturday?
Huge growth. I mean, he's getting better and better every week. His confidence is getting better and better every week, and I know how much he he puts into this. So there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be great.
Let's go ahead and get into those offensive keys for both TCU and SMU. As always, we're going to start out with TCU first. Sonny Dykes said a lot about what TCU needs to do offensively in the post-game presser dating all the way back to Colorado. What did he say?
He said to trust the game plan, and that's something that they're really learning to do. They're really trusting this process, and it's showing up on the field offensively. He said that Chandler has to get more comfortable on the field, and that's exactly what he's doing. Chandler right now ranks first in Big 12 and 11th nationally in total offense, averaging 334 yards per game.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that we show these stats just so that TCU is not lagging behind this season. While it might be a little bit of a downer that they lose the first game of the season, TCU is putting up really great numbers, and we're seeing them get more and more settled and confident. SMU has a 9.0 ranking them 31st in the Football Power Index, ESPN's Football Power Index, and TCU has an ESPN Football Power Index of 9.5, ranking them 30th in college football. I think we need to show these stats to show just how closely resembling these two teams are as of right now in the first 3 games of this season. This is probably TCU and SMU's most evenly matched game so far, and it just so happens to be one of the biggest rivalries for both of these teams. So there is a ton riding on this game tonight. And looking at the offensive efficiency, TCU has a 57.8, ranked 51 out of 144, and SMU is 82.4. And keep in mind, this is on a scale of 1 to 100. So SMU really is getting a lot more efficient right there. So there are a couple of categories where it's like SMU excels, TCU excels, and SMU lags behind or TCU lags behind. But for the most part, these two teams are very evenly matched. So it's going to be super exciting. Second key?
Second key, obviously, avoid penalties, which is something we've talked about earlier. There are too many penalties on offense, which is something that Sonny Dykes said earlier, and we really have to avoid getting those penalties because it really rattles the team. Against Houston, 28% of the time after a penalty, TCU was unable to score, with 7 penalties for 75 yards. With Nicholls State, 5 penalties for 50
yards. What a mouthful today.
20% of the time unable to score after a drive. In Colorado, 30% unable to score after a drive with a penalty, with 10 penalties for 78 yards.
This is what happens when we make it stat heavy. We got to figure something out. But they also, their third key, they've got to find a dependable receiving target. We've talked about this a little bit. It's awesome that TCU is getting 10-plus receivers involved, double-digit yardage in a single game. But it's also a little concerning that TCU hasn't yet found that one guy that every single time Chandler Morris steps on the field, he knows, I can throw to Jared Wiley. I can throw to Savion Williams. You know, we saw that was something that Max Duggan had with Quentin Johnston, and then with his running back, we saw Kedre Miller. We've seen Chandler Morris now develop that relationship with number 9, Amani Bailey, as he's talked about. But we need to make sure that we see today, honestly, one of those guys that it's like, okay, this is Mr. Reliable. This is Mr. Dependable.
I think we're going to see that. SMU's offensive keys to the game. First one being protect the pocket from TCU pressure and sacks. So TCU is averaging about 4 sacks per game. However, Preston Stone has only been sacked 1 time, and that was against OU.
So they're going to be 2 evenly matched teams, obviously. We mentioned that 6% that was TCU's offensive pressure. We mentioned that 16 and that 30, all of those stats right there. That's what TCU is able to pressure these guys defensively against the opposition. But, you know, SMU is doing really good protecting their guy just as much as TCU's protecting their guy, Chandler Morris. So it's really going to be a game where we get to figure out which team shows up today. I think that was what we kind of talked about pregame. Might be a little more defensive heavy, but it's really just going to come down to kind of like Colorado, who shows up and plays all 4 quarters. And our second SMU offensive key is going to be long offensive drives. They didn't have those versus OU. They were getting the offense off super quickly. Basically, they were able to have 16 plus plays, averaging about 11 a drive, and they weren't amounting any points out of those. That's something that you don't want your offense to get stuck doing. Your offense is going to get worn down. They're going to get tired. And at that point, I mean, there's nothing you can do. So not necessarily is it always great to win that time of possession category win. They're going to want to not have super long offensive drives with no points amounting from them. And we've got a lot to talk about on the defense. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Bud Clark had to say this week on Tuesday.
We had different things we could have fixed, first couple weeks. But I feel like we starting to come together, figure out who we are, figure out our mentality pretty much. So, that's a big thing for especially back seven. To be honest with you, right now, it's coming up to a pause. So, this is the biggest one. This is the one that's going to be the most memorable pretty much. So, you win this, everybody going to talk about it. You lose it, everybody going to talk about it. So, either way it go, it's going to be remembered. It's actually great. When I got my pick, I came up to Paul and then Mike because I think usually the Paul or Mike that got the pressure for me, and I was like, I wouldn't be able to get that without y'all. So I appreciate y'all. Keep putting that applying that pressure, and I need it. You do what you do on the front, we'll do it on the back for sure. We got you. We talk about it, but we don't too much later. Just get us going. Get us flowing because it's a motivation. They came here last 2 times they came here, they beat us. So we talk about winning at home, dominating at home, and that's what we need to do. It's been pretty good. They got a couple shifty backs, but it should be pretty interesting going against those backs, honestly. Just keep them from throwing it, I guess, just hold them down, cover sacks and different things like that. You keep everybody covered, you can't do much with it.
Bud Clark with a lot to say about the defense this week on Tuesday. And we've got a couple of keys for the TCU defense and the SMU defense. Once again, starting out with TCU, key number 1 defensively.
Absolutely. TCU's defense is going to have to be fast and physical today. They have to really close in on that pocket. Their quarterback, Preston Stone, definitely has some experience, lots of experience, let's say. And he's really comfortable in that pocket. So he's going to have to learn today to be a little bit shifty and maybe rattle some of our defensive players.
Absolutely. The defense is going to want to make sure to lock down on that and close in on that pocket. A lot of that pressuring we were talking about, that's going to come into play on the defense today. Preston Stone definitely playing a very clean game so far this season. And TCU's second defensive key, they're going to want to stop the run game. Now, TCU has done an incredible job of this so far this season. So good that I just need to read you exactly what TCU has done so far. Right now, the other team is averaging 1.8 yards a run attempt. 1.8 yards. That's incredible. That ranks in the highest of the country right now. They're averaging 60.7 a game, and our running backs are recording almost double, triple those yards a game. So to see that defense hold them to that and then see the offense be able to produce has been really good in stopping the run game. Absolutely. Only 2 touchdowns on the run. Both of those did come in the red zone. So TCU is definitely going to want to make sure to lock down on those touchdowns in the run game, especially in the red zone. SMU is very good at making open pockets for their guys. They're very good with that. So TCU is definitely going to want to lock that down today. And if they can stop the run game, there's only one more thing you got to stop. So if they can at least do one of those, they can make sure that they can definitely focus on those guys that are going to air it out.
Absolutely. Mentioning that, going back to that, TCU has started the same 11 defensive players for the last 3 games. So they're definitely getting more comfortable and they're learning the ropes a little bit and finding their way, obviously. Like you said, they're doing well at stopping the run game. So let's just hope that they can do that with SMU because they do have an experienced quarterback.
Absolutely. While TCU has been a little more on the touch and go side, been able to kind of change out those guys, figuring out what works for them, the TCU defense does exactly what's working for them. And so does SMU. They've got a ton of experience, yeah?
Yes, SMU has 10 seniors on the defensive line and lots of transfers. And like Sonny said earlier this week, this is the best team that SMU has had in a while.
That's a lot for Sonny to say, too.
It's a lot for Sonny to say.
The defense boasts guys with 3 years of starting experience under their belt. Returning seniors like that is why TCU was so incredible last season, returning those guys with experience. We've said it all season long. You can't mimic in-game experience in practice. So for SMU to be able to come in this season hot, ready to come into TCU's territory. They want that skillet back, and they're boasting a bunch of guys with experience. It's definitely going to be a game today. And number 2, they're going to want to create turnovers. TCU, recording from Sunny Dykes, TCU is 15-0 over SMU when they win the turnover battle. So SMU is going to want to win the turnover battle today, but it's going to be important that that defense gets those turnovers and they get those fumbles and they get those interceptions. So offensively, switching over to the other side, TCU is going to want to make sure Chandler Morris plays a super clean game today. And the third key?
That third key is going to be to eliminate explosive plays against OU. Their last game had their top 5 rushers with the longest run in double digits.
And that's not their total rushing yards. That is their longest run. Top 3 receivers were also in double digits. And as always, explosive plays keeps the offense refreshed for the other side, something you don't want to do as a defense. So for those guys to be able to stop explosive plays today, stop giving up easy points, and definitely be able to get their offense on the field so they can score some points is going to be important for them today. And as always, once we come back, we're going to close out the show with our stars of the game.
We wouldn't be able to do the things we were able to do this year without the Flying T Club. So we got to continue to get people involved. It's more important right now than it's ever been.
Flying T is special. It's the best thing that I've encountered in college. It allows us to be able to offset a lot of the costs that our scholarships aren't able to cover. If people like winning, invest in the Flying T Club and NIL.
It's almost a necessity now in the college football world. I mean, you got to kind of invest in the programs, and what you put in is what you get out.
John's Grill is the newest venture from John Bennell and the Bennell's Restaurant Group. A ranch-to-table concept featuring food, beer, and spirits from around the great state of Texas. Our menu is designed by Chef Sean Alvarez and features 2 chef-inspired burgers, the Fatty and the Flatty, plus a brisket menu perfect for your casual night out. Fast casual service in a fun, relaxed, family-friendly environment, featuring 11 big screen TVs for you to catch the big game on. Our mixology team has created a crafts cocktail and beer menu featuring local spirits and brews from across Texas. John's Grill, home of the Players Club show each week, 2905 West Berry Street in Fort Worth, or online at johnsgrill.com.
In Botham, we put people first. So we simply start by listening to you. Whether you're searching for customized insurance, HR, or financial solutions to protect your home, car, health, business, or employees, our specialists are here to serve you, the people you care about, and your success. Higginbotham, insurance, HR, and financial services. Inspired by you.
Obviously, a lot to look forward to today. Kickoff at 11 a.m. versus SMU here on our home turf. But as always, we got to talk about our personal stars of the game that are going to be coming up tonight. I'll go ahead. I'll start first, like normal. I'm going to go with Chandler Morris today. I think that might look like a safe option, picking the quarterback, as always. But I think that Chandler today is going to be the first time that he's able to really show everyone what he's able to do. We know that he's established number 9 as his running guy. I think today we're going to see him establish those guys. I think we got a glimpse of what he can do when he trusts players. We talked a lot about Savion being available for Chandler last week during practice, and we saw it play out this past weekend when he got a 31-yard touchdown. So I think we've seen what he can do when he trusts those guys. I think this week in practice, it's being the 4th game, he's got a lot more trust in those guys. And I think we're going to see him be able to air it out and pass it off and then get a little shifty in the pocket himself.
Absolutely. I'm going over to the other side of the ball. Defensive lineman Nambi Obiezor against Houston. He had 4 solo tackles, 3 assists, and 7 total tackles. Him and Johnny Hodges have been our 2 main guys on the D-line, and they're really showing up, and I think he's going to continue to do that today. Like we said, today might be a very defensive-heavy game, so we're really going to be needing him on that line, and I think he's going to be the guy to do it.
Absolutely. As always, kick off in 40 minutes from now, and we've got a lot to check out after the game. Got a post-game show coming up. Players Club will be airing on Monday. That's at John's Grill every Thursday, 6 p.m. Definitely want to check that out. And like we showed you earlier today, State of the Frogs with J.W. Wilson and Sonny Dykes, as always. So a lot to check out. Head on over to frogstoday.com. And for the Frogs Today pregame show, everyone here, I'm Maggie Hale.
I'm Courtney Stockhaus.
Go Frogs!